Oscar Piastri controlled the Japanese Grand Prix for 35 laps. He held off George Russell without ever being threatened. He matched the Mercedes on older tires, and then a safety car stole all of it from him. The broadcast showed Kimi Antonelli taking the win and the championship lead, but the data proves something else entirely. Inside the McLaren garage, the simulations had Piastri emerging from the pit stops ahead of both Mercedes cars. The numbers were clear. His first stint pace was within 0.2 of Antonelli on harder compound tires. George Russell never even got close enough to use DRS. This was not a driver surviving. This was a driver waiting to strike. Then Ollie Behrman crashed at Spoon Curve. The safety car came out exactly 1 lap after Piastri had pitted for fresh tires. That single lap of bad timing erased a 6-second advantage and handed the win to Antonelli on a silver tray. So here is the real question. Did Piastri lose just a race, or did he lose the championship? The next section exposes why Antonelli's win was not as dominant as it looked. Kimi Antonelli is the youngest championship leader in Formula 1 history, but that 14-second winning margin in Japan is a lie. 25 of those seconds came after the safety car when he had nothing but clean air in front of him. Before that, before the crash, before the restart, Antonelli was stuck behind George Russell and going nowhere fast. The rookie has done something special to lead this title fight, but the way he won in Suzuka says more about bad luck for Piastri than it does about raw speed from Mercedes. George Russell admitted his car had instabilities he could not fix, and yet he still finished second. That tells you everything. In the 17 laps before the safety car, Antonelli on fresh tires was only 1/10 faster than Piastri on older hards. That is not dominance. That is a narrow advantage that only becomes a landslide when the track empties out. Antonelli got the one thing Piastri lost, a free track with nobody in front. Now here is why the paddock is still scared of Mercedes. The next 2 circuits are Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. Both are power-sensitive tracks. Both reward Mercedes' engine advantage more than any chassis trick McLaren or Ferrari can bring. Antonelli gets a month to enjoy leading the championship, while his rivals spend a month trying to solve a problem they cannot fix with downforce alone. The momentum is real, but it was handed to him by a safety car. The next section shows you the lap-by-lap proof that Piastri was the fastest driver in Japan before the crash. Let us go straight to the data that proves this was Piastri's race to lose. Before any safety car, before any pit stop chaos, the Australian was matching Antonelli's lap times within 0.2 of a second while running on harder compound tires. That is not a driver clinging on. That is a driver controlling the pace from the cockpit. George Russell's onboard telemetry shows he never once closed to within 1.2 seconds of Piastri during the entire first stint. The MCL39 had rear grip out of the final chicane that created a 4/10 advantage every single lap. Russell was stuck, and so was Antonelli behind him. The critical number nobody is talking about is the pit window. Piastri came into the pits on lap 34. The safety car was deployed on lap 35. That 47-second gap between his pit exit and the crash at Spoon Curve erased a 6-second advantage he had already built into his tire strategy. If he had pitted 1 lap later, he would have taken the restart from second place with fresh rubber. If he had pitted 1 lap earlier, he would have been ahead of the safety car queue entirely. Lap 34 was the single worst possible moment to box, and McLaren had no way of knowing that. Former F1 strategist Bernie Collins broke it down after the race. That safety car timing is statistically the worst possible moment for the race leader because it compresses the entire field exactly when you have committed your strategy. Piastri did nothing wrong. His engineers did nothing wrong. The crash simply happened at the exact moment that maximized the damage to one car and maximized the gift to another. The next section moves to the crash itself and explains why Behrman's 50G impact was not a driver error, but a warning sign the sport ignored. Ollie Behrman hit the barrier at Spoon Curve with 50 Gs of force. That is enough to break bones. He was lucky to walk away with only a knee contusion, but here is what the FIA does not want you to focus on. The crash was not driver error. It was a mechanical inevitability built into the 2026 power unit rules. At the moment of impact, Franco Colapinto was running in 0 kilowatt mode, meaning his car had just 500 horsepower while Behrman was at full deployment with 1,000. It's that 45 km/h speed difference through a corner with almost no runoff made contact unavoidable once Colapinto moved even slightly to the left. Every single track has these 0 kilowatt zones. zones. Teams choose to run without electrical power through certain corners so they can save energy for the straights. It is a tactical decision that creates massive speed differentials between cars that look like they are in the same corner at the same time. Helmut Marko warned the FIA about this danger in Bahrain testing. He said someone would be seriously hurt. Now we have a 50G crash and a driver who could not stand up afterwards. The system that caused this is the exact same system Formula 1 marketed as an overtaking enhancement. The scary part is where this happens next. Suzuka has grass and gravel to slow a car down before the wall. Imagine this same crash in Las Vegas or Jeddah or Baku. Concrete barriers on street circuits do not give way. The Halo saved Behrman from worse injuries, but the Halo is a last line of defense. The FIA needs to stop relying on it and start fixing the root cause. Behrman is a rookie in his first full season. He should be learning racecraft, not recovering from a 50G impact because two cars had different battery settings. The next section shifts to the battle McLaren and Ferrari are fighting while everyone watches Mercedes. Lando Norris spent the Japanese Grand Prix weekend fighting his own car more than any rival. Reliability issues destroyed his rhythm. A hydraulic problem in practice meant he never got a clean long run. But here is the number that matters for the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari's SF26 finally showed genuine race pace at Suzuka. Charles Leclerc's long-run simulations were within 0.3 of a second of Piastri before both drivers hit traffic. That is the closest anyone has gotten to McLaren in race trim all season. Ferrari has solved their rear tire overheating problem with a revised beam wing introduced in Japan. McLaren fixed the same issue 2 races ago with suspension geometry changes. Both teams are now converging on Mercedes from different engineering paths. The development race math is simple. Mercedes has a 4/10 qualifying advantage, but only a 1.5 race pace advantage. McLaren's simulation models predict parity by the Spanish Grand Prix in June. That means the next 6 races will decide whether Mercedes runs away with both titles or gets caught. Lewis Hamilton's frustration was audible after the race. He said the upgrades are not moving the needle. That is a direct contrast to McLaren's floor upgrade, which delivered 0.2 of a second immediately in second practice. Fred Vasseur told Italian media that Mercedes is beatable. The question is whether Ferrari catches them before the title fight is already over. For McLaren, the path is clearer. Fix Norris's reliability, keep Piastri in this form, and the Constructors' Championship is absolutely within reach. The next section goes inside the safety car timeline to show exactly how one lap stole the win from Piastri. Let us freeze the race at the exact moment everything changed. Behrman crashed at 14:32 local time. Piastri exited the pit lane at 14:33 and 19 seconds. The safety car boards came on at 14:33 and 47 seconds. Piastri passed the pit entry at 14:34 and 2 seconds. He was 43 seconds too early. That tiny window turned a certain victory into a defensive fight for second place. The rule that killed his race is Article 55.8. When a safety car is deployed, the pit lane closes for 15 seconds. Piastri had already pitted, so he lost the advantage of fresh tires and got compressed back into the pack at the same time. The statistical anomaly makes this even more painful. Spoon Curve at Suzuka has produced a safety car in 4 of the last 7 races. McLaren's strategist should have anticipated a high probability caution window between laps 30 and 40. Pitting on lap 34 was mathematically the highest risk window. If Piastri had boxed before lap 30, he would have guaranteed track position. If he had waited until after lap 40, he would have guaranteed fresh tires for the restart. Lap 34 gave him neither. Former McLaren strategist Randy Singh called it perfectly after the race. You either pit early and own the track position, or you pit late and own the tire advantage. Pitting in the middle of that window is gambling on a clean race. Japan proved that gamble fails more often than it succeeds. The championship implication is brutal. Piastri lost approximately 11 points relative to Antonelli because of this single timing decision. And that is exactly the margin that could decide the title in Abu Dhabi. The next section answers the question nobody asked during the broadcast. Where was Max Verstappen in all of this? Max Verstappen finished 5th in Japan. That is his worst result since Australia 2024. But the finishing position does not tell the real story. His radio message after the race said 3 words that should terrify Red Bull's factory. The car is doing things I cannot predict. That is not a driver complaining about balance. That is a driver admitting he does not trust trust his own machine. The RB22 has been abandoned internally since Bahrain testing, but the development token system means Red Bull cannot introduce a completely new side pod design until Spain. They are stuck with a car that Verstappen himself says is undrivable. The technical root of the problem is simple. Red Bull's rear suspension geometry is incompatible with the 2026 power unit torquey curve. The car becomes unstable under braking into slow corners. That is why Sergio Perez qualified within 1/10 of Verstappen, but finished 8/10 slower in race pace. The setup window is so narrow that only one driver can find it on any given weekend, and even Verstappen is now struggling to stay inside it. Adrian Newey's reduced involvement has left the aero department without its integrating mind. The floor upgrade they brought to Japan delivered negative gains. The car got slower. Here's what nobody is saying. If Red Bull cannot fix the RB22 by Miami, Verstappen's streak of consecutive title fights may end at 4. He is too good to stay down forever. But the championship math does not care about talent, it cares about lap times. And right now, the RB22 is the 4th fastest car on the grid. Verstappen is dragging it to results it does not deserve. That cannot last forever. The next section closes the open loop from the beginning of this video and answers whether Piastri lost just a race or the entire championship. So did Piastri lose just a race, or did he lose the championship lead? The answer is both. He lost the win in Japan, and he now trails Antonelli by 14 points in the standings. That 7-point swing from second place to first is exactly the value of the safety car timing error. But here's the data the points do not show. Piastri's race pace on identical tire conditions was superior to Antonelli's. The Mercedes advantage is real, but it is narrow. And that narrow gap is closing with every upgrade McLaren brings to the track. The Miami upgrade race will tell us everything. McLaren brings a floor edge wing and revised rear corner. Projected gain is 0.2 of a second. Mercedes brings only a front wing tweak. Projected gain is 1/10. The convergence is happening exactly when McLaren needs it most. If Piastri wins in Miami, the Japan safety car becomes an asterisk, a footnote, a bad memory. If Antonelli wins again, the championship becomes a Mercedes procession, and the rookie sensation becomes an unstoppable champion before the summer break even starts. Jenson Button said it best after the race. Oscar is the most clinical driver to come into Formula 1 since Max, but clinical drivers need clean weekends. Japan was not clean. That is not on him. So the safety car at Suzuka did not just decide a race, it drew a line in the championship sand. On one side stands Antonelli, smiling, the youngest leader in history. On the other side stands Piastri, silent, knowing he was faster. The next 30 days will decide which one of them tells the story of 2026 and which one is left saying what if.